When I first became a parent, I assumed that sleep is just something that happens, doesn't come so naturally anymore. Sleep is something that is quite complex. Sleep deprivation is not good for either the parent or the baby.
Meet Himani Dalmia, baby sleep whisperer, best-selling author, and the force behind India's gentle baby sleep movement. As a certified infant and child sleep specialist and the co-founder of Gentle Baby Sleep India,
sleep like a baby, such an important term.
Actually, we use it to mean a very kind of bindas and deep sleep, right? Babies actually don't sleep like that. Like they have very light sleep and they have kind of very disturbed sleep.
India ranks number 2 when it comes to sleep deprivation in children. So what happens to children who are sleep deprived?
So the growth hormone is secreted during sleep. Immunity develops during sleep. Good sleep protects the heart. It leads to better attention spans. The brain grows during sleep. So if they lose out on that sleep, they actually lose out on a lot of that growth and development. We can see that babies are falling sick more often. They may not eat very well. As they grow older, their learning gets affected. Misdiagnoses of ADHD are actually due to sleep deprivation.
Have you ever held your baby at 3 a.m. completely exhausted, wondering, is it normal that they're still not sleeping through the night? You are not alone, and today we are talking about it all. In this episode of Maatehood, we are diving deep into baby sleep, what's biologically normal, what the science actually says, and how we can move away from the pressure-filled advices to something more gentle, respectful, and real. From night waking and breastfeeding to sleep regressions, we are unpacking it all. We have Himani Dalmia, certified infant and child sleep counselor, co-founder of Gentle Baby Sleep India, author of Sleeping Like a Baby, and a true pioneer in changing the narrative around baby sleep in India. If you are a tired parent looking for answers, you are in the right place. Welcome to Maatehood, Himmani. Such a pleasure having you here today. I think we've been chatting for quite some time and finally made it possible. So thank you.
It's lovely to be here, Priyanka, talking about my favorite topic. Really happy to be here.
So glad to hear that. So you've been an expert on baby sleep. It's such a big concern for new parents, and I think one of the most overwhelming phases when it comes to setting the right routine for babies. But I would love to know your journey. What really inspired you to dig deeper into it and really do the research and understand that there's so much behind baby sleep and sleep routine rather than just, a natural phenomena?
Yeah. So, just like every other parent, when I first became a parent, I assumed that sleep is just something that happens.
Yes.
Babies will sleep when they're tired. The newborn phase, sure, was a little blurry. But that's the newborn phase, and you think that you're going to come out of that at some point. When my daughter, Devika, who's now 9.5, when she was 3 months old, she actually slept really well. There was this wonderful phase where she was sleeping through the night and, I would wake up in a panic to check on her. And my husband and I thought that we had nailed this. We were rock star parents. We had a miracle baby. But of course, that phase did not last. And when she was 4 months old, suddenly she was waking up every hour. And I found myself awake at night, holding a very awake baby, Googling things like 4-month-old not sleeping and trying to figure out what was going on. And then, of course, I realized that there's this thing called the 4-month sleep regression. And, I started reading about that. And this coincided with two other things. One was a visit from a family friend from the US who gifted me my very first baby sleep book, which I read, and I was fascinated. And that sent me down this rabbit hole of reading about sleep, reading research, reading studies, reading books. And the second thing that happened was that I reconnected with a former schoolmate of mine, Neha Bhatt. She had a son about a year older than my daughter, and she was similarly well-read and passionate about sleep.
Yeah.
So she and I decided to co-found the Facebook group, Gentle Baby Sleep India, just so that we could share our reading, our knowledge, our experience, because this is such a pain point for parents. The group just exploded. It grew organically. Thousands of parents invited their friends, and it now has 60,000 members. It's still very active. And Neha and I, along with a group of passionate moms, voluntary admins, still run the group. And along the way, I decided to become a leader of the La Leche League, which is an international breastfeeding support, a nonprofit. I decided to study sleep formally with an institute in Australia. And I did that. I got certified. Neha and I were both originally writers, so we encapsulated everything that we had researched and learned and experienced in a book, Sleeping Like a Baby. My second daughter was born, so everything got reinforced for me with that experience. And then more recently, I decided that I wanted to research baby sleep more academically. And so I started a postgraduate research program at one of the few places in the world that baby sleep is studied very deeply, which is at the University of Durham. Professor Helen Ball has started something called the Durham Infancy and Sleep Center. So I'm a part of that center doing some postgraduate research. And since, along the way, I was supporting so many parents on the group and offline, online, I decided to also, do some consults with parents. So I counsel parents on sleep. I hold workshops. And I'm just happy that something as important as sleep and something that is quite complex is finally getting the attention it deserves and is being given the importance that it needs by parents in India as well.
Yeah. Very beautifully put together, and I think such an important thing to understand, because as new parents, sleeping yourself and getting your baby to sleep, both are extremely challenging. And I think it's very natural that as soon as you give birth, you reach out for lactation support, you reach out for mental health support, but nobody's reaching out for baby sleep counseling or baby sleep support. So I'm so glad you started something like that and would love to know so much more around this. Sleep like a baby, such an important term. हम लोग भी बहुत regularly we use it. Oh, it's weekend, I just want to sleep like a baby. What does that actually mean?
So the reason Neha and I called the book Sleeping Like a Baby was because we wanted to, understand that phrase in a different way. Because sleeping like a baby, although like you said, we use it to mean a very kind of bindas and deep sleep, right? But that isn't how babies sleep. I mean, babies actually don't sleep like that. Like they have very light sleep and they have kind of very disturbed sleep. But they do have a very particular kind of sleep. And I think that it's important for parents to understand the biology of babies and understand what's natural for them. They don't sleep like adults. They sleep like babies. They have very immature sleep systems. Their, ability to sleep longer stretches develops very gradually over time. They need to co-regulate with their parents. They need to, they need a lot of soothing and support from us. And if we can understand their needs, just like, how are we supposed to present food to them? How are we supposed to support them on their feeding journey? How are we supposed to, help them walk, right? We need to help them to sleep as well. By understanding how their biology works. So they sleep like babies, which is in their own particular way. And they need our support.
Absolutely. So before I get more into what should be the pattern like, what should be the science behind, when putting your baby to sleep, I want to understand from you, like, how important it is for new parents to get a counseling on baby sleep. And should they turn to some expert? Is it really important and crucial and should be part of the postpartum phase as a very crucial thing to understand?
Yeah, I think so. Because, like I shared with my own experience as well, I thought that sleep would just happen. And then it hits you like a ton of bricks when it doesn't just happen. And there's a lot of misinformation out there. There are lots of myths about sleep. I often say that if you drop a parent and a baby on an island, they will know what to do because it's instinctive, right? Then the noise of society, our own conditioning, people around us telling us what to do,
Yeah.
varied opinions will actually not interfere with that instinct that the parent has. The baby and the parent have a very strong instinctive dance that they can do with each other. But in modern society, we have moved so far away from what is the biological norm.
True.
And, there's so much confusing information out there that we would benefit from seeking out some help to cut through that noise, to cut through that misinformation, and for us to understand what it is that we need to do, for us to learn how to tune into our instincts as parents, right?
And understanding our children better.
Absolutely. Knowing how to read those cues, not doubting ourselves, knowing how to respond, knowing that it's okay to do something, maybe not so recommended to do something else. So I think it's a great idea. Just like we get a lot of childbirth support, I think that now as parents, we're open to that. We're open to learning about childbirth, even having a doula or just understanding how best we can support ourselves through a natural birth. Yeah. Now, one would say, hey, a natural birth is a natural birth. So why do we need to learn about it? We should just be able to do it. But the fact is that the norm these days is a very medicalized birth. So if we want to go against that grain, we'll need to learn about it, right? And we understand now that there's so much support for, say, lactation. Again, one would say, hey, breastfeeding is the most natural thing in the world. Why do you need support on this, right? Sure. But again, it doesn't come so naturally anymore. And you need that support. So it's the same way. I mean, sleep is something that is quite complex. And sleep deprivation is not good for either the parent or the baby. It can be very frustrating. It's a massive cause for postpartum depression. And sleep is incredibly important for our baby's growth and development. True. So if the support is out there, I would say just go for it.
No, totally. I completely agree with that. So Himmani, what goes on in first few weeks after the baby is born? Let's say first 3 weeks and then first 6 weeks and then first 12 weeks. How the sleep pattern of the baby and the habits change?
So I think the most important thing to know is that when our babies are born, they don't have a circadian rhythm. They don't have that internal day and night clock. That is something that develops gradually between 2 and 4 months, and even beyond that. So they don't have a sense of night and day. And nothing that we do is going to give them that sense in the first 2 to 3 months. So everything is very baby-led. We have to go with their rhythm, sleep when they sleep, and trying to change it is actually not going to work. So if we think that, okay, let me try to keep my baby awake through the day so that my baby sleeps at night, that is just going to leave you with a very overtired and cranky baby. If we feel that, if we give our baby a lot of light during the day and keep it dim and dark at night, that'll help the baby's body clock form. In the first 2 to 3 months, it will not help because our babies don't have the hardware to process that. So at that stage, we kind of have to go with their rhythm and we can't change it. Those things do start to help once our baby is about 3 months old. Not keeping them awake during the day, but just giving them exposure to light and, having a bedtime routine and starting to give a rhythm to the day. It's something that's actually happening naturally with them at that point. The other thing that we need to know is that babies need a lot of physical contact with us. So human babies are born very early in the gestation process. That's because when we evolved from walking on 4 legs to walking on 2 legs millions of years ago, our pelvis became very narrow, and human babies have a very large head which houses the large human brain. Now, in order for this large baby head to fit through the narrow pelvis of a biped, the baby has to be born very early in the gestation process. So scientists actually theorize that the human pregnancy should be 18 to 21 months long, that it would need to be 18 to 21 months long for our babies to be born at the same level of maturity and development as other mammal babies.
Wow.
So if you think 18 to 21 months versus the current 9 months, that's almost the entire first year that our babies are not even ready to be out of the womb as yet. And what is the closest thing to the womb? It's not a swaddle, it's not a cradle, it is the body of the parent.
Yeah.
So it's only when they feel our warmth, get physical skin to skin contact with us, hear our heartbeat, hear us breathing, hear our digestive juices. That is when they actually get that womb-like care.
Yeah.
So they seek that contact with us. They sleep best if they're on us. Our body is like an incubator for them, right? They're charging on us. So there a lot of physical and mental growth and development and regulation actually happens when they're in contact with us. It's also a survival instinct.
True.
So again, prehistoric babies millions of years ago, if they were placed down and they remained sleeping, they would be in danger of being picked up by a predator or being left to starve. So it's an evolutionary instinct that developed that they can only sleep on the parent. Now, this was extremely normal, say a few 1,000 years ago or even a few 100 years ago. And even now in many cultures, you will see babies wrapped to their parents, like, parents, mothers or fathers working in fields or in tribes even today will have their babies wrapped to them all day and all night and sleep next to them at night. This is how human babies are programmed. But in modern society, for various reasons, there is this kind of conditioning that we should, put our babies to sleep on some sleep surface, on a cot, on a bed, something. And actually, our babies don't sleep that way.
No.
So understanding that they need a lot of physical contact, especially in the initial months, but actually for almost the entire first year, is another thing that we need to understand.
True.
And the third thing is that babies get overtired.
Yeah.
So if we let them be awake for too long, if we don't look for early sleep cues, if we don't understand that they have a certain battery life to stay awake, their bodies produce cortisol, which is a stress hormone, which actually makes it more difficult for them to sleep. And that is true not just in the newborn phase. Well, actually, it's true even for adults. But let's say that after the age of 3 years or 5 years, their sleep matures a bit. They're able to handle this a little bit better. But certainly in the first 5 years, it needs a lot of mediation by parents that they get the physical co-regulation they need. They don't get overtired. They have a good routine.
True.
So, so a lot of that happens in the first 4 months. At 4 months, like I mentioned, there's a major milestone, which we call the 4-month sleep regression. Many things happen at that time.
So Himmani, babies, they wake up very frequently through the night and even during the day. So what is the main reason behind that?
So there's actually a big pivot in how we have to manage their sleep. So in fact, 4, 5, 6 months is a very common age that parents come to me for help, because suddenly that newborn phase is over. It's changing. And at 4 months, there's a milestone where babies become very aware of their surroundings. So now they're very easily stimulated and distracted.
True.
And B, they develop something called sleep cycles. So all human beings sleep in cycles, even you and I do. When we fall asleep, we go through 5 stages of sleep: drowsy, light, deep, deepest REM. And that takes us about 2 hours as adults. Now, at the end of every sleep cycle, all of us actually wake up. So even you and I wake up, but we don't realize we're awake. We will just roll over or pull up a blanket and we'll go back to sleep. And we won't remember the next morning that we actually woke 3 or 4 times the previous night, but we do. Now, newborn babies don't have these cycles, but at 4 months, they develop these cycles. And those cycles are 40 minutes long for them. Now, at the end of that sleep cycle, they also wake up, just like us. But the difference is that they don't know how to start the next sleep cycle on their own. So they need soothing from us to start the next sleep cycle through breastfeeding, through bottle feeding, through rocking, soothing them in some way. So the reason that they're waking up is just that it's the end of a sleep cycle. As they grow older, slowly they start connecting some cycles on their own. Sleep matures, but very gradually, up till about 3 years. So the real reason that babies wake up at night is actually at the end of these sleep cycles. It's not because they're hungry. Yes, when we breastfeed them or even when we bottle feed them, sure, as a newborn, they might be hungry as well, but that's not the primary primary reason, they would still wake up even if they were full. When we breastfeed them or bottle feed them or rock them, they actually get soothed to go back to sleep. And that's how they connect their sleep cycles and start the next sleep cycle. So this is also something that parents need to understand about why babies wake at night, right? It's not due to hunger, it's not due to habit, it's at the end of sleep cycles, and it's totally biologically normal.
So what happens usually that parents, as soon as the baby is born, they rush into setting a sleep routine for children, you know, as young as 2 weeks, 3 weeks old. Is that a wrong habit or a wrong expectation from the babies?
It is, because babies don't have a circadian rhythm, so they don't have a day-night clock. They can't have, a perfect schedule where they're sleeping at night and waking up in the morning. That develops gradually between 2 and 4 months. So after 3.5, 4 months, they definitely do benefit from having a routine, and slowly and earlier bedtime. But at 2 weeks or 4 weeks, they just don't have the hardware for it. So we need to follow their lead. What we need to ensure is that they don't get overtired. So we shouldn't simply let them sleep when they're tired, because little babies don't do that. They keep going like little energizer bunnies and they get overtired. So we do need to be watchful of early sleep cues. We need to know what is their wake window, their capacity to stay awake, so that they're not staying awake beyond their capacity, and they're taking regular naps during the day. Bedtime can be late. It can be an odd bedtime, but that's okay, as long as they're sleeping frequently enough and they're sleeping enough in totality in the day. So for example, a 1-month-old would be sleeping 18 to 20 hours in the day. A 2-month-old would be sleeping about 17 to 18 hours in the day. So as long as we're keeping an overall eye on that, that's actually good enough. You can always have a bedtime routine. That's lovely. It's a lovely cue for our babies from the very beginning. But the time that bedtime routine is happening initially, there's no hard and fast rule about. That's something that, like I said, can develop around 3.5 to 4 months.
Okay. Is it a myth that by the age of 6 months, babies start sleeping through the night?
Absolutely. It's a myth.
Okay.
So like I said, babies wake at the end of sleep cycles, just like all of us do. Adults also wake at the end of sleep cycles, but we're able to roll over and go back to sleep. Babies develop these cycles at 4 months. They learn gradually over time how to connect those sleep cycles, which is actually a process that's completed by about 3 years, very gradually, 3 to 3.5 years. So the answer to when do babies absolutely sleep through the night is actually 3 to 3.5 years.
Wow.
Sleep develops gradually. The myth of the 6-month-old sleeping through the night actually comes from a couple of places. The first is that, how do you define sleeping through the night? Because very often it's defined as 5 hours of continuous sleep. So yeah, sure, that might be happening with some babies, not all. With some, it might be happening. Secondly, very often if a baby is bottle fed, formula is heavier to digest than breast milk. It can lead to longer stretches of sleep. Not always. It's not a guarantee, but it can. However, that is not necessarily a better thing, quote unquote better, because it's only doing that because it's heavier, and the human infant's gut actually needs lighter feedings and more frequent feedings. That's completely natural and normal for babies. The other reason is that, especially in the West, there has been a culture of sleep training babies with a lot of crying. So a lot of separation-based training where babies are left to cry. And then it is believed that babies learn how to sleep. Whereas now we understand the latest research and the latest understanding of child psychology and neuroscience has explained to us that that's not actually what's happening. Babies are kind of getting conditioned that crying as a signal doesn't work. They still wake, they still experience stress, but they don't call out to the parent. And this can be associated with a lot of emotional damage and trauma, and is not really the healthy way to support their sleep.
Absolutely.
But because that practice has been very popular in the past and continues to be in many societies, in many countries, that can lead us to believe that a 6-month-old can sleep through the night.
Yes.
But according to biology, a human infant, growing up in a forest or on an island with a parent, a 6-month-old is not going to be sleeping through the night. So,
Wrong expectations there.
no,
then.
unfortunately, yeah.
So, Himani, you really emphasize on gentle sleep training.
Yeah.
So, what is the difference between gentle sleep training and the forced sleep training, which has been followed very regularly in the Western countries?
Yeah, so in fact, I would divide it into 3. I would say there is traditional sleep training.
Yeah.
Then there's actually some versions of that traditional sleep training that are a little bit gentler, which are often called gentle sleep training.
Mm-hmm.
And then there is just gentle sleep management or gentle sleep parenting, which is what I espouse. So the traditional sleep training is cry it out, which means you leave your baby to cry. So you feed your baby, change your baby, you leave your baby in a room, in a crib, and you let your baby cry themselves to sleep.
Yeah.
That's the kind of very traditional extreme form of sleep training. And the idea is that your baby will cry for a few days and eventually stop crying and learn how to put themselves to sleep or put themselves back to sleep. Then over the last few decades, modifications to this arose, like, all kinds of things like the pick up, put down method, the chair method, break sleep associations, try to set good sleeping habits. So these very slightly gentler, more harmless sounding things.
Yeah.
But actually the essence of these was also the same. It was that that the parent is not going to support the child to sleep. You're going to keep reducing your support. So you might support your child for 5 minutes, but then you'll step away and you'll let your child cry. So these methods are actually doing the same thing. They're still breaking your child's trust in you. You're still basically saying that you need to do this on your own and I'm not going to support you to sleep. So it actually leads to the same kind of, stress for the baby. There are studies that have shown that, sleep-trained babies do wake at night. If you test their cortisol levels, their stress levels, those stress levels are quite high. But they're not calling out to the parent because they've been conditioned that calling out to the parent has no effect. The parent doesn't come.
Yeah.
Right. And then
it's quite traumatizing in a way.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. There is now a whole school of thought, trauma experts, child psychologists, neuroscientists who absolutely advise against this and who suggest responsive, nurturing parenting day or night. Why is it that we're advising gentle, nurturing parenting throughout the day, but suddenly at night the parenting button just goes off? Why are you not supposed to parent your babies at night?
Where are the emotions gone now?
Exactly. Where is that nurturing, that responsiveness? So what I suggest and what we suggest in the book and on the Facebook group, and increasingly a lot of experts worldwide also suggest, is biologically normal sleep. So what is normal for the human species? Normal for the human species is a baby sleeping close to the parent, tucked close to the parent.
Yeah.
A lot of breastfeeding, which actually regulates the baby's sleep. Breast milk contains sleep hormones. Suckling induces sleep. That physical contact leads to a lot of co-regulation. And at the same time, along with giving that physical support, whether it's through the day and through daytime naps, through contact naps, or at night through things like bed sharing, and responding to our babies every time they wake, helping them go back to sleep when they wake at the end of sleep cycles. Along with that, it is understanding the routine they need. So, you'd be surprised, Priyanka, but 90% of the game is understanding their sleep cues and not letting them get overtired.
Okay.
If one just manages to do that, the improvement in their sleep is dramatic, So if we're just able to understand that at this age, this is my baby's capacity to stay awake, this is how much daytime sleep she needs, and this is how I can help her get that daytime sleep, and this is what their bedtime should be.
Yeah.
that's really 90% of the game. Babies sleep really well at night. And so we're just understanding their biology. So gentle sleep parenting or gentle sleep management, which I advise, is all about understanding the biology of your baby.
Yeah.
Understanding their needs at every age, their capacity at every age, what is normal at every age. And if you do that, sleep is not difficult to manage.
True.
It's natural.
You said that the parent should really understand the sleep cues the
Yeah.
baby is giving out. So, what are those cues, and how can actually parents understand them or decode them?
Yeah, so this is the key language we need to learn as parents. So early sleep cues are things like rubbing eyes, rubbing ears, pulling hair, looking a little glazed, averting the gaze. As they get a little older, losing interest in toys, a kind of slowing down that happens.
Yeah.
So like I said, babies have a certain capacity to stay awake at different ages. So it's different at 4 months, 6 months, 8 months, 1 year, 2 years. So let's say your baby's capacity to stay awake is 2 hours. What will happen is that at about 1.5 hours or 1 hour 40 minutes, your baby will show you these early sleep cues, rubbing eyes, rubbing ears, pulling hair, looking a little glazed. Now, if you immediately pick up your baby, take your baby into a dark and quiet room and soothe your baby to sleep, your baby will fall asleep easily and will sleep relatively well. But if we miss those cues and that 2-hour wake window closes, suddenly they'll actually look very awake. Very playful, active, alert, even hyperactive. And you'll be like, okay, she's not tired, she's fine, right? Actually, what has happened is that the body has released the stress hormone cortisol to wake them up. It's like serving them a cup of coffee. Like, hey, you're tired, here's a cup of coffee, wake up, right? So this is called the second wind. It's the second rush of energy that they get from that cortisol production. Now, by the time it's 2.5 hours, they'll start getting fussy and cranky. These are actually the late sleep cues. But this is when we usually say, oh, okay, the baby is tired.
Yes.
But actually, by then it's too late. We've missed the boat. So now when you take the baby to sleep, the baby will not sleep. So he'll be fussy at the breast, fussy at the bottle. It'll take endless rocking and walking for him to fall asleep. He'll cry. He'll try to jump out of your arms, right? Because that cortisol is causing a lot of sleep resistance in them. Then finally they'll cry and they'll crash out and they'll fall asleep. But the damage has been done because a lot of cortisol has been produced. So now they won't sleep well. They will not nap well. It'll be a short nap. They'll wake up cranky from it. Now, because the nap was short, there'll be more cortisol production. So then this cortisol production goes on through the day and it causes a lot of night wakings. So to prevent those excessive night wakings, we need to ensure that we're following early sleep cues. We know about the wake windows for our baby's age. And also we're ensuring that the naps are complete, long, restorative, deep naps so that they get a proper recharge during those naps. That's how we ensure they're not overtired, which is when they sleep optimally at night.
Yeah. I remember while I wanted to put my babies to sleep, I think in the first year, sometimes it would take me like 2 hours, just lying next to them, cuddling them, and hoping that they would fall asleep. But usually it would be me who would fall asleep and then not the kids. It used to be such a difficult phase, I still remember. And I think I was also somehow rushing into setting a sleep routine for them way too quickly and not really following their cycle. So now I understand why this was happening. There's another myth, or I don't know if it's a fact, that if you stop the naps during the day, they would have better sleep during the night. Is there something like that? And if so, what is the right time or age when the napping should stop?
Yeah, so that's a myth. Babies need their daytime sleep. In fact, naps are very important for their growth and development as well. There are some studies that have been done with, say, 2 groups of babies. They're all engaged in a new activity. And then after a while, one group of babies takes a nap and the other doesn't. It's been found that the group that took the nap actually processed the learning from that activity a lot better than the group that didn't take the nap. Because neural connections are formed during sleep. short-term memory is converted into long-term memory during sleep. So naps are very important, and they're not interchangeable with night sleep. So it's not like if we say, oh, okay, my child is sleeping, 12 hours at night or even 13 hours at night, so it doesn't matter if my child isn't napping well. No, that split is important. How much daytime sleep versus how much nighttime sleep. Secondly, if a child is not taking regular, timely, long naps, that child is most likely going to be overtired.
Yes.
And there is going to be cortisol production, so stress hormone production, which is actually going to lead to very disturbed sleep at night.
Yeah.
So sure, your baby should not be sleeping excessively during the day, which doesn't mean that we wake them up. Because again, when we're waking them up, we're actually causing overtiredness. If they're sleeping, their body needs sleep. What it means is that there's something wrong with their routine.
True.
So they're not sleeping enough at night, or their wake windows are too long. Hence, they're crashing out and taking these long naps. So we need to work holistically on their whole schedule.
Yes.
Their correct wake windows, the correct number of naps for their age, which is actually their own biological pattern. We just need to understand it, right? And how much they need to sleep at night. Then they very beautifully come into that balance of the right amount of daytime sleep and the right amount of night sleep. But certainly, yes, a lot of families that talk to me tell me that they've been advised by their elders, by their doctors, to keep the child awake during the day.
Yes.
But this is absolutely not the right thing to do. They need to ensure their child is well rested during the day for their child to sleep better at night.
Because I remember my younger one, when he was at the preschool, that was the time he stopped napping during the daytime, and he would go to bed like 7:38, and then he would wake up in the morning like 7. That was a good amount of sleep he got. But the moment he started nursery, so at this new school, there was a culture of nap time.
Oh, I see.
So all the kids would get this cuddly toy. They would bring their own cuddly toy to school, and all of them would take a nap of about 45 minutes to 1 hour. So he got back into the nap routine. Now, what was happening that he was not sleeping in time in the night.
That age is different.
So that was like when he was 4. So then I felt like, is it the nap which is causing this? So should I stop, the nap time, or should I talk to the teachers? But eventually I felt like he was much calmer, and I did not really want to force it. So it worked out. We worked together on another sleep routine, and it kind of worked out better.
So children drop their daytime nap between 3 and 5 years. So there is a range. And it is determined by the individual child. Like my elder daughter dropped her nap at 3 years. My younger daughter dropped it at 5 years. And neither of them would have been okay with the reverse. It was very dependent on them as individuals.
True.
So, and families that I've worked with, toddlers have dropped their naps anywhere between 3 and 5 years. And it's not an overnight drop. It happens over the course of about 6 months.
True.
So certainly at that age, sometimes the nap does start to delay bedtime and cause disturbed sleep at night. In which case, it's a good idea to drop the nap and to do an early bedtime. And get 12 hours of night sleep, right? But if the child is not ready to drop the nap, which again is dependent on the child, then they do need that nap. And the length of the nap should be determined by the child. So not by us. So it shouldn't be that, we will only allow the child to sleep 1 hour. No. If they're sleeping, let their body decide how much they need to sleep, whether that's 1 hour or 2 hours. That's okay. And we follow wake windows. So for example, we know that at 3 years, the wake windows are 5 plus 7. So that means 5 hours after they wake in the morning, they need to take a nap. And then 7 hours after that is when their bedtime would happen. So if a child wakes at 7, they would nap from 12 to say 1:30. And then their bedtime would be 8:30. But what often happens, especially in India, is that there is this culture of this afternoon nap, this post-lunch nap. So after school, right? And it's because actually the whole family has almost this siesta kind of culture, right? So grandparents also want to sleep at that time and all that. So very often the child will be up at 7, but this nap will happen at 2. And then the child will sleep till 4. Now we know that the wake window after the nap is 7 hours. So if the child has woken up at 4, they're not going to go to bed until 10:30, 11. Right. So then it gets messed up.
True.
So if we're doing the nap, it needs to be as per the wake windows, an early nap, so that you can still get in that earlier bedtime.
Yeah.
Right. But yes, if your child is in that range and they seem to be dropping the nap, as long as, you've tried everything at your end, they have a dark and quiet room, you've tried to soothe them to sleep, but no, come hell or high water, they're not taking that nap, or they're really delaying their bedtime, then sure, drop the nap, do an early bedtime, 12 hours of night sleep. But like I said, after the age of 3 years.
So there's another very common advice, Himani, जो mothers को usually regularly दी जाती है, that you should sleep while your baby is sleeping, especially first 3 months.
Yeah.
How practical that is?
I think that in the first 3 months, it's essential. Because like I said, the baby doesn't have a routine. The baby doesn't have a circadian rhythm. So the baby might be going to sleep at 3 a.m. And waking up at 12 noon or 1 p.m. So as the mother, you'll need to sleep at that time as well. Sure, you may not need to sleep 10 hours. So you could sleep from 3 till say 9 or 10. But there is actually no possibility of you sleeping at another time, So I think that it is a good idea to sleep when the baby sleeps. As babies grow older, they start having an early bedtime, let's say a 7 p.m. bedtime, waking up at 6 or 7 in the morning. So I know some moms who actually like to go to bed when the baby goes to bed, or at least by 8, right?
I could never do that.
Yeah, no, I couldn't either. But I think, even as adults, some of us are more night people and some of us are more morning people.
True.
I am a night person. So for me, like after my baby would go to bed, I would have a video monitor and my husband and I would have dinner or watch something or just do some work. And that would be our time. And then we would turn in by say 10 or 11. And sure, if the baby needed me, I would be watching on a monitor, popping in and out. That's fine. And since I'm not a morning person, when my baby would wake at say 6 or 7, that would be the time that I would actually hand over the baby to my husband and be like, okay, I did the night shift, right? This is yours now, right? So, and I would actually sleep for another hour or 2 at that time, right? And my husband would manage the baby. But like I said, there are some parents where, they're more morning people and they're not late night people. So they like to go to bed at 8 or 9 and they like to wake up at 5 or 6 with the baby, right? So that's absolutely fine. I would say that, if you are the primary caregiver and a baby does need nighttime parenting, right? They do wake at the end of cycles. We need to soothe them back to sleep. So you're working a night shift, even as your baby grows older. Now, like anyone working a night shift, if you're working a night shift, you need to sleep during the day. So either you need to get that sleep in the morning while someone else handles the baby, or you need to nap with the baby during the day. So you don't need to take every nap with the baby, but I would say take one nap with the baby. That will not only help your baby sleep better because of that physical proximity and contact, but it will also help you as the primary caregiver, as the one doing the nighttime parenting, catch up on some rest. And I think it's important for us to do that in a very practical way without any guilt. It's not wrong for us to need rest, right? It's okay. We need to catch up on our sleep at some point in order to be better parents. And very often what society tells us is catch up on your sleep by not parenting the baby at night. Now, that's not the gentle approach. We need to catch up on our sleep in a different way, in a more practical way, by working out our routine through the day, so that we're able to either do the early bedtime or take a nap with the baby or sleep a bit in the morning, so that we're able to do the nighttime parenting also, and we're not compromising on our own rest either.
Totally true. Abhi, earlier we were talking about it right before we started the show, that very interesting fact you told me. India ranks number 2 when it comes to sleep deprivation.
in children. Yeah.
in children.
Yeah.
So what happens to children who are sleep deprived? Like,
Yeah.
how does it affect their mental health, their emotional, and even their creativity, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think we need to talk about what happens when children are sleeping, when
Yeah.
babies are sleeping.
Yeah.
A lot goes on. It's not just a rest state. It's not like a pause button where they're just resting. In fact, the brain and the body are quite busy
Yeah.
while babies are sleeping. So the growth hormone is secreted during sleep, especially in the hours before midnight, which is why one of the reasons we stress an early bedtime. So it's important for their growth. Sleep is important for their growth. Immunity develops during sleep. So cytokines, which are the proteins that are the building blocks of immunity, are produced during sleep. Good sleep protects the heart as well. It leads to better attention spans. Neural connections are formed during sleep. The brain grows during sleep, right?
Yeah.
So all of this amazing growth and development is actually happening while our babies are sleeping. So if they lose out on that sleep, they actually lose out on a lot of that growth and development. Now, what can we visibly see? We can see that babies are falling sick more often.
Yes.
They're more cranky and more fussy, more clingy. They may not eat very well. Their emotional regulation is not very high. As they grow older, their learning gets affected. A lot of behavior in school, which is emotionally dysregulated, or a child who's not paying attention in class, a lot of hyperactivity, even misdiagnoses of ADHD are actually due to sleep deprivation. Right? And so focusing on the sleep and ensuring that the child is sleeping well suddenly leads to a very much more emotionally regulated child who's learning better, creating better, eating better, not falling sick as often, and is just thriving in every way.
Yeah.
Right? So there is a very visible difference.
True.
So one question that parents often come to me with is, why do I need to work so hard on my baby's sleep when all around me, I see, babies just sleeping on sofas or sleeping in restaurants and malls. And, why is that a problem? Why do I need to do all this hullabaloo around my baby's sleep, right? Now, so the thing is, what we don't realize is that those babies who seem to sleep anywhere and everywhere are actually grossly sleep deprived. So a baby who should be sleeping 14 to 15 hours in the day might be sleeping 11 hours. Right? Because the baby doesn't have a routine, has a very late bedtime, is taking a couple of short naps. So any chance that they get, it's like the battery goes off, right? They just shut down and they go to sleep. But what are they actually like when they're awake? Very often they're very cranky and fussy.
Yeah.
They're very clingy. They cry a lot, right? They fall sick a lot. They don't eat well. Now, unfortunately, as families, we may not connect that behavior with the lack of sleep.
Yeah.
We might think my child is just not eating well. Why is my child falling sick so much? Do I need to work on their immunity?
Need more
Why
emotional
is my child
support.
Yeah,
Anything
or
like that.
we might think that okay, my baby is cranky and fussy, and then you might end up showing them a screen to regulate them, or you might end up feeding them some sugar to just calm them down, right? But that's just barking up the wrong tree, right? If you deal with the root cause, the actual issue, that's actually sleep deprivation.
True.
And if they and once they have a good schedule, they will not be crashing out here and there. So sure, you will need to perhaps work a little harder on their routine. Maybe the approach will not be so casual and laissez-faire, but overall, through the day and night, the child will be thriving.
I think culturally, एक बहुत बड़ा involvement है when it comes to setting this right sleep routine for children, especially in the joint families, as we were talking about. बच्चों का sleep बहुत easily we tend to ignore, and I think it becomes very difficult also for the mother or the father to drop everything else and like, oh, it's sharp 7:30, I have to put my kids to bed. It becomes very difficult. So I think it's a collective responsibility of entire family to understand what the child is going through and what is their sleep cycle like and what is their sleep routine, how essential it is for them to get the good sleep, deep sleep, longer sleep. And it just culturally, I think there's so much more to be done yet when it comes to understanding the sleep and focusing more on this. You must be getting a lot of questions around that from parents.
Absolutely. Very often the parents are, or in some cases, just the mother is very invested and totally, there with wanting her baby to sleep and have a good routine and sleep
Yeah.
early. But she's just not getting the support that she needs. And that can lead to a lot of stress for the
True.
mother, because the mother is also the one who is doing the nighttime parenting, right? So if the child is overtired,
Huh.
she is the one who is dealing with those night wakings, right? Sometimes it's both parents, sometimes it's just the mother. And so, everyone has an opinion, but everyone is not doing the nighttime parenting, right? And everyone is not dealing with that overtired child. So it's
True.
actually a bit unfair. So, look, one can try to talk to the family. It's a good idea, like I said, to have an early bedtime,
Yes.
have a video monitor, right? If you need to step out, nobody is saying that if your child is going to sleep at 7:30 p.m., that you are also vanishing from the earth at 7:30, right? I mean, if you want to, that might be your choice. But you can put your baby to bed, step out with a video monitor, have
Yeah.
dinner with everyone, finish your chores, do your work, do anything else that you need to do, and then turn in later, right?
Yes.
Now, another concern is, but the father returns from work very late at night. Well, the father needs to understand the importance of the child's routine. Fathers also need to take responsibility for it. If that means they need to come home earlier to spend time with their child, if they need to have some tough conversations in their workplace, if they need to reprioritize, reorganize their lives, they should go ahead and do that.
Yeah.
If that's really not possible, then okay, meet your baby in the morning.
True.
Your child is going to be up at 6:37. You can get like a beautiful 2 hours with your child in the morning rather
True.
than getting those 2 hours at night.
Yes.
So everyone just needs to understand the importance and understand that, this is what's good for the baby. This is what's good for the child.
Absolutely. Many times I even hear many parents saying the thing like, oh, हमारा बच्चा तो तब तक नहीं सोता जब तक हम नहीं सोते हैं. And
Yeah.
I think it's such a wrong thing to accept.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there's so much that they need
Yeah.
to change in their households, and
Yeah.
this culture needs to change for
Yeah.
sure.
No, absolutely.
There are also things like co-sleeping, bed sharing, or even room sharing. So what are the differences, and what do you suggest that parents should go for?
Yeah. So co-sleeping includes room sharing and bed sharing. Co-sleeping, the term refers to the child being in the same room as the parent.
Yeah.
So room could be, a separate cot or bed, or it could be a bedside, a sidecar bassinet,
Yeah.
a bedside cot. Or it could mean bed sharing, which means the child is in the bed with the parents. Now, in certain cultures, the norm is, the cultural norm is that the child sleeps in a different room from the parents.
Yeah.
That is not the cultural norm in India. We're a very bed-sharing culture, right?
Yes.
So children actually do grow up sleeping in their parents' beds.
Yeah.
This is also the biological norm. So what's normal for the species? So if you see, for example, other primates like gorillas, chimpanzees, monkeys,
Yeah.
you'll never see a baby gorilla sleeping on some leaves somewhere. It won't happen. The baby gorilla will always sleep clinging to the mother, right? This is biologically normal for human babies as well. So bed sharing is the biological norm. In most of the world, including India, it is also the cultural norm. It's only in certain pockets of certain industrialized nations, mostly in the West, that the cultural norm has become a baby sleeping somewhere else, right? So I do recommend co-sleeping. So at the very least, room sharing, or having the baby next to you in a sidecar cot.
Yeah.
The ideal, in my view, is bed sharing. Because bed sharing, there's a lot of research now. There are pioneers like Professor James McKenna, who's an American anthropologist. He founded something called the Mother-Baby Behavioral Sleep Lab in the US. and Professor Helen Ball, who is at the University of Durham in the UK. They've done a lot of pioneering research on bed sharing and shown how when a baby sleeps in proximity to the parent, there's actually a lot of growth and development that happens. Our bodies actually incubate babies. So their stress regulation, their breathing, their heart rate regulation, their oxygenation, all of that actually happens in close proximity to us. Our body regulates them, incubates them. So there is a whole lot of benefit to bed sharing as well.
Yeah.
And it also leads to babies sleeping better because they feel very secure. Right? They feel very safe. They feel very secure. At least if the baby is in the same room or in a sidecar cot, you can still put a hand on them. They still know you're nearby. You can still hear or feel their first movement or their first sound and respond within a couple of seconds, right? So that is still, although some babies will not accept even that, they need to be tucked very close to you, which is also very normal. But I would say that is kind of the bare minimum that I would say should be there. And there's no safety issue. Bed sharing is completely safe. There is something called the Safe Sleep 7, which are 7 very common sense rules that you should follow for safe bed sharing. Things like your mattress should not be super soft. You shouldn't have extra pillows and blankets. The parents should be sober. No smoking or drugs or sleep medication. Long hair on parents should be tied up. Baby should not be swaddled. Things like that. So if one looks up the Safe Sleep 7 rules and one follows them, they're actually really instinctive and common sense rules. Then bed sharing is perfectly safe, normal and beneficial and convenient.
Yeah. So until what age bed sharing is recommended and what is the right time that babies should start sleeping separately? So Himmani, when it comes to babies' growth and development, what is ideal, sleeping with the parents or sleeping separately?
So the completely child-led approach is to say whenever your child asks to move out. So independence in our children is actually very organic and natural, So as they grow older, they are more comfortable with independence and they also ask for it, right? So the completely gentle and child-led approach is to just wait for your child to ask to move into a different room or a different bed, which can happen anywhere between 4 years and the preteens, right? So
I don't see that happening with my daughter until 12, I guess. She still insists. If the father is traveling, that's the very first thing. Can I sleep with you tonight?
Same with my kids. So that's the thing. So like I said, till the preteens, right? So there are some kids who actually get very excited about having their own bed and their own room, and at least a few nights they sleep there. They do come back to their parents' bed. Even in the West, there are kids who will, in the middle of the night, come into their parents' beds, right? Because that's actually very instinctive and normal to sleep with the parents. Humans are a communal species. Even as adults, we like to sleep with our partner and we don't like to sleep alone, right? I mean, generally speaking. So that's very normal. If you, as the parent, want to push for it and want to lead it, so the parent-led approach versus the child-led approach, I would say it's much easier after 3.5 to 4 years. They are a little bit more independent, it's easier to separate. Again, they may come into your bed at night or every few nights. They may want you to sleep with them. It's not going to be like a sudden button where it's like a cutoff and they're sleeping on their own. But that is when it becomes a little easier for the parent to push for it. If you do it before that, I would say that it's going to be an uphill task. And neither you nor the child are going to get much sleep in that case.
And it so much depends child to child, Like some kids, my younger one, he's very independent. So by the time he feels a little bit sleepy, he would just pick up his blanket and he would be like, okay, I'm going to go to sleep. He would just go to his bed. He does not want to sleep with me. My daughter, she's now almost 9. She's like, just wants all those cuddles all the time and wants to sleep with mama and doesn't like to go to her room. And it's like, there's a task, it's a big task to put her to sleep.
How old is your son?
He's 5. He just turned 5. So he is very independent and he doesn't like to sleep with me. He gets disturbed.
Yeah.
I also get very disturbed. So both of us like, okay, you sleep in your bed and I'm going to sleep in my bed.
Okay.
I think I first few years pretty much slept together. First year, I think. And then very quickly, both the kids, they started sleeping in their own beds and they sleep much longer and much rested when they're in their own beds. And same counts for me. Usually I put them to bed myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Until they're asleep, I do not go out of the room.
Yeah.
Only when they're asleep, then I move out.
Yeah.
So,
And that's great as well, because bedtime is such a sacrosanct time.
true. Most beautiful time of the day.
It is.
Yeah.
It's very important for connection, to fill their emotional cup, for them to
Yes.
process everything that's happened during the day, for them to feel those, relaxing hormones like oxytocin, the love hormone, to feel that connection,
True.
calm down, feel secure.
But this is the most beautiful time of the day that we spend together, and the kids look forward to it. I look forward to it. And that is the most important time to have a deeper conversation with both the kids.
Yeah.
Talking about their emotions, their feelings, what they've gone throughout the day,
Yeah.
and what they look forward to doing tomorrow. So it's just, as you rightly said, the most important time of the day to spend with your children. So Himani, when it comes to babies' sleep, are there any red flags when the parents should consider proper counseling or some sort of sleep support?
Yeah, so it's different at different ages. So with a newborn, for example, so the first 4 months, I would say it would be if the baby is crying a lot. If the baby is just very difficult to settle and soothe. The baby is not clocking 18 hours of sleep a day. Things like that. I would say that is where they should look at some support. As they grow older, through the first year or the second year, I would say, again, if the baby is not taking good daytime naps, has a very late bedtime, is waking up very excessively at night, crying, if the baby is having active night wakings, where the baby is up and wants to play in the night, or has a very late bedtime, like 2 a.m., 3 a.m., things like that, I would say, again, because these things can be addressed. So it's a good idea to seek help on them. Some cases at any age where there could be, some support needed is actually if the baby has an oral restriction like a tongue tie. So tongue ties are generally associated with breastfeeding issues, but they actually impact sleep as well in a very big way. So if you have a tongue tie, a lip tie, an arched palate, so any kind of oral restriction, it actually impacts the way you breathe when you're sleeping and can cause sleep disordered breathing. So babies who have that might not be able to fall asleep easily, might wake very frequently, might remain latched to the breast continuously in order to, to keep the airway open in order to breathe. So if one is experiencing excessive sleep difficulties, it may be something that needs to be checked. I would say the first port of call would be a lactation consultant or a sleep consultant who can first check the symptoms and see, whether anything needs to be done. And then it would need to be properly diagnosed by a pediatric dentist, an airway-focused pediatric dentist. And then the line of treatment decided. A pediatrician usually can't diagnose that. So that's also important to know, because very often, parents will just ask a pediatrician who may just dismiss their concerns, and then you kind of go on suffering. The baby also suffers and you as the parent also suffer. So it's important to speak to a specialist about that. It's quite common as well. But otherwise, just some of the behaviors I mentioned before.
Recently, I was watching a video somewhere, and there was this concern parents had that the child, he was always sleeping with mouth open and snoring sometimes. And those are the things we sometimes take very lightly, that it's normal. The babies might be, snoring or
Yeah.
sleeping with their mouth open. Eventually, they diagnose something wrong
Yeah.
with their oral conditions and health, and that led to further many problems.
Yeah.
But I think these things are to be taken seriously, and you have to seek help and talk to an expert and understand what is actually going on behind it.
Absolutely. Yes.
There's another thing which I think most of most of the parents go through and really don't know how to decode it. Right before the bedtime starts, what goes on? What happens to children? Why do they become so active, overstimulated, and they just don't want to go to bed?
Yeah.
They're like hyperactive.
Yeah.
What exactly causes this? And how to handle this?
Yeah. I know this is a common pain point.
Yeah.
Okay, so firstly, actually, there is a rush of energy that the body gets just before bedtime. It's linked to the way the body's circadian rhythm and homeostatic rhythm works. The homeostatic rhythm is the sleep pressure, the sleep drive. So when we're coming to the end of the day and we're coming to bedtime, because both the circadian rhythm and the homeostatic rhythm are actually heading to sleep, the body gets a jolt of energy to stay awake at that time. And that can cause a very hyperactive period at bedtime. But this is exacerbated if the child is overtired, right? Now, again, when you're talking about a toddler or an older child, it's a little bit different because then there's also a lot of FOMO going on, and they're generally very distracted and stimulated and very active and they want to do things. But especially in like the first 2 years where we're dealing with babies or just very young toddlers, it's usually more biological. Not so much about personality or mood or behavior. And that can come from overtiredness, right? Or lack of connection. So if they've just had too much time apart from their primary caregiver, they haven't had enough connection time with their mother, their father, their primary caregiver. That's one of the reasons that apart from looking at all the basics like the sleep hygiene and the schedule being good, the child not being overtired, that very calm and relaxed and solid bedtime routine is very important. So, if they're on solids already, then what time is their dinner? Are they having a warm bath after that or just a sponge? Are we just carrying around our baby to say good night to my windows, good night to my doors, good night to my books, good night to my toys, good night to my grandma, kind of sing-song chanting good night. Another thing, now this is a little counterintuitive, but what really helps is actually roughhousing. So especially once you have a slightly older baby or a toddler, cuddling with them on the bed, making them giggle, having a light little pillow fight, throwing them around. Dads are really good at this, right? So having that little bit of playful, rough play, a little bit of wrestling kind of thing in bed actually releases a lot of stress. So it produces happy hormones, relaxing hormones, right? They laugh a lot, right? They feel very connected with the father, and especially the father. I mean, anyone can do it, or the mother. And then like bedtime reading. So reading books with them. Again, pulls them from the active outer world towards inner worlds and calmness and imagination, and gives them something to think about as they're drifting off to sleep. Music works very well.
Exactly, that's what I do.
We play a lot of music while they're falling asleep, right? So things like that. We need to have a predictable set of steps that we take in the last couple of hours before sleep time, which helps them kind of calm down and prepare to sleep.
True. What I do is I just half an hour before they go to bed, I just put on their favorite music and I'm like, just dance. Dance for 30 minutes. Dance it out. And then we go to bed. We read some book and fall asleep. So that works out really good.
Yeah, that works as well.
But talking about steps, new parents who just had a baby and they are trying to set a routine and a sleep cycle for their newborn, what are the steps and things they have to keep in mind and how they can actually approach this to set the right bedtime routine for their baby?
So let's talk about, a slightly older baby who's, let's say, 5 months old, right?
Yes.
So let's say their circadian rhythm has formed. They now have some semblance of a day-night routine. This post the 4-month sleep regression and all of that, right? So, so the first thing is parents need to understand that the bedtime routine actually starts at the beginning of the day, because it is the full day's routine that is actually going to impact your bedtime as well, right?
Okay.
So the steps to form the right bedtime actually starts in the morning, because you need to have the right day nap schedule, right? So so it's understanding what are the wake windows. Now, for example, a 5-month-old needs 4 solid naps in the day, totaling 4.5 hours of sleep, right?
Sure.
So all of this information is actually available. Like, it's available in the book, it's available on our Facebook group, available on my Instagram. Like, we know that this is what 5-month-olds need, this is what 6-month-olds need, and so on. So at 5 months, they need 4 naps, totaling 4.5 hours. And their wake windows start at about 1 hour 15 minutes at the beginning of the day and end at about 2 hours 20 minutes at the end of the day. So another rule of thumb is that the wake window at the beginning of the day is always the shortest. They increase gradually as the day progresses, and at the end of the day is the longest. So we know that if the baby wakes up at 7, 1 hour 15 minutes is the wake window. So nap 1 needs to start around 8:15. And if you actually observe your baby, that is when those early sleep cues will actually show up. So they're ready for it. So we need to help them take those timely naps, ensure a pitch dark and quiet room. At 5 months, they still need a lot of physical contact. They may need us to hold them, sleep. They might sleep on us, or lie next to them. So they need those contact naps, as they're called.
Sure.
So help them have that support through the day and complete those 4.5 hours of daytime sleep. So let's say that ends at around 5 p.m., right? So now you know the last wake window is about 2 hours 20 minutes. So around 7:20 is when your baby is actually going to be asleep, right? That's the sweet spot for your baby to be asleep. So then, and a 5-month-old is not eating solids. So let's say around 5:30 is when you do either a warm bath or even a sponge is fine, right? And change them into their pajamas, change their diaper, talk to them, sing to them, maybe a light cream massage or something like that. And, then carry them around. And then you read to them. Even a 5-month-old, you can read to them. They love it. You can read to a baby when they're in the womb. You can read to newborns. So read a lovely picture book, a couple of lovely picture books to them, play music, and then nurse to sleep, feed to sleep, rock to sleep, right? So that's kind of the sequence to follow. Ensure a pitch dark and quiet room at bedtime as well. So the full daytime routine, so the baby is not overtired, there's no cortisol production, hence there's no sleep resistance. And then just the last hour before bedtime, a sequence like the one that I've described.
Yeah. Beautifully put together. I'm sure it's going to be very helpful for the new parents and very, very much needed and essential. And you also mentioned about massage, and even at Maate, we follow the Ayurvedic practices, right? And we really kind of promote the Ayurvedic rituals, the traditional practices like baby massage. That is one of the most beautiful rituals we follow in Indian culture. Do you think evening massages can actually lead to deep sleep and longer sleeps for the babies?
Yeah, so I think that it does play a role in, releasing any pain or tension that may be present in the body, and releasing a lot of happy hormones, relaxing hormones. I think what's very important though is keeping in mind 2 things. One is it should not be a very harsh or vigorous massage. I think that a lot of our very traditional massages are a little rough on the baby. So it should be a gentle massage. And the second thing that I always recommend is that the massage should be done by the parent. It should be done by a family member, even if it's a grandparent. I remember my mom used to sometimes do the bedtime massage for my babies, because it's a time for bonding. And that touch, that physical touch with the baby promotes a lot of bonding and a lot of oxytocin production, right? Happy hormones, love hormones, which are produced in both the baby and the parent.
True.
So it's a very sacred ritual that
Yes.
should be done by the family. So the spirit of that massage needs to be warmth, gentleness, love,
Yeah.
right? As per the routine of the baby, which only people in the home can actually follow, right?
True.
And just that sanctity of that love and connection, seeing what is making the baby smile at you,
Yeah.
right? You're singing to the baby, you're talking to the baby, you're touching the baby's giggling, looking around, right? So it's such a beautiful
I
moment.
know.
It's both physical and psychological and spiritual, and it should be done by a family member very gently.
Oh, I'm so missing those early months with my babies now. That used to like such a beautiful phase, right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
And the connections they form with you. It's
Yeah.
amazing. But yes, I am looking at this beautiful book written by you, Sleeping Like a Baby. And thank you for giving it to me. I wish I had it when my children were younger. But I'm really curious to know how, documenting everything, your learnings, your experiences, how did it shape your motherhood journey?
Okay, so I was always very particular about sleep.
Yes.
Because from the beginning, I actually understood that following the science and my instincts, right, made everything easier. So sleep was easier, and once sleep is easier, the whole day and the night flow more smoothly.
Yeah.
And I was actually very lucky to have reconnected with my co-author, Neha Bhatt, who felt similarly. And since her baby was a year older than mine, she was almost like a guide for me. Like, she would, she was my village, like she would tell me what to expect next, what's normal, what isn't, So I think it's really important to have that, right? Like-minded parents that you can talk to about your experience. And we had that in the Gentle Baby Sleep India community as well. So a lot of like-minded parents, especially the group of admins, we would have a WhatsApp group. We would be talking to each other all the time, crying with each other after a bad night, or just supporting each other through it. So I think I was very grateful to have that village on my journey.
Yeah.
And, not just with sleep, but I think bringing a certain mindfulness to our parenting is very fulfilling.
Yeah.
It makes the journey easier. So I have loved reading about and engaging with many aspects of parenting. I call myself a parenting book addict, so I love reading parenting books. Kiss Me by Carlos Gonzalez, Being There by Erica Commissar, The Whole Brain Child, Peaceful Parent, Happy Kids, like a whole lot of stuff. I love that. I love listening to podcasts with different parenting experts. So just engaging with ideas about parenting, I think has influenced a lot of it's not that I'm doing something that is being imposed on me. It allows me to think about what feels right to me.
Yeah.
It validates my instincts, right? And so whatever feels right to me, I suddenly understand the logic behind it and the theory behind it, and I am able to move forward with more confidence, right? So I think parenting is just this, it's not this journey where you just kind of drift through. I think you need to engage with it, be mindful about it, and it makes it all the more enriching and enjoyable.
And be open to learn every day, because you need such deeper understanding of each and every subject.
Yeah.
It's not easy. There's so much involved. There's so much science behind everything.
Yeah.
So as you rightly said, if you're learning, you're reading this, it just opens up your whole perspective.
Yeah.
And you learn so much about yourself and your children, which just eases this journey of parenting, I feel,
Yeah.
the parenthood, the motherhood. But all the new parents out there, this is the book from Himmani, Sleep Like a Baby by Himani Dalmia and Neha Bhatt. Do pick this book if you're struggling to put your babies to sleep or having any difficulties with dealing with their sleep cycles and sleep routine. It's a beautiful book. Thank you, Himmani, for being here today. I'll be moving on to the next segment, which is the community Q&A. So we have a question from our community today from Simran, and Simran is asking, I'm a mom to a 9-month-old. My question is, everyone around me keeps telling me that my baby should be sleeping through the night by now and that I must be doing something wrong, but she still wakes up 2 to 3 times to feed. Is that normal? Should I be sleep training her? Honestly, I just feel overwhelmed and guilty most nights.
Mm-hmm. No, so a 9-month-old does not sleep through the night. So that's absolutely okay. It's okay for them to wake 2 to 3 times, even 3 to 4 times. It's not a problem. Like I mentioned, babies wake at the end of sleep cycles, and they learn how to connect those sleep cycles gradually over time. A 9-month-old cannot connect all of their sleep cycles. The only thing I would say is check the sleep hygiene. Although 2 to 3 times, 3 to 4 times is okay, if there's something missing and if you fix what's missing, it could reduce.
True.
Right? So for example, a 9-month-old should be taking 2 solid naps totaling 4 hours. They have wake windows of 2, 3, 4. So 2 hours, then 3 hours, then 4 hours.
Okay.
So if do you have an early bedtime? Is there any light in the room while your baby is sleeping? If all of these things are in place, then your 2 to 3 wakings are probably fine, like absolutely fine. But if you feel one of these things is missing, fix that, because that will actually reduce your wakings further.
Moving on to the next segment, Himmani, fun segment we call it. So we had a lot of interesting conversations, serious conversations. So let's have some fun in the show now.
Sounds good.
And today the game we are playing is called Sleep Parenting Moments. And just say whether you've been there or not.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Slept sitting up with a baby in your arms.
Been there.
Oh, all of us. Thought something was wrong with my baby because they weren't sleeping like others.
Have not been there.
No, me neither. Cried out of pure sleep exhaustion.
Been there.
Yeah. Secretly hoped someone else would wake up for the night feed.
Tough one.
The fathers.
The father did wake up very often. So I guess not been there. Yeah.
Hid in the bathroom for 5 minutes of silence.
Been there. Yeah.
Sent your baby to grandparents just to get a full night's sleep.
Have not been there. Yeah.
Sang the same lullaby 35 times in one night.
Have been there for sure. Yeah.
Well, amazing. Thank you for playing this game with us. And since you've done so well at the game, so we have this beautiful hamper from Maate for you. I hope you enjoy using them on your children, all the products.
Thank you. That's a pleasure. Great. We're looking forward to using them. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much. But Himmani, thank you for being here today. I learned so much. I wish I had learned it much earlier in my parenting journey, in my motherhood journey, but I'm so glad to have this conversation with you. Thank you for sharing all your deep understandings, your knowledge, your insight, all the researches you've done. I mean, I'm amazed to hear about it all.
Oh, thank you. It's been a pleasure.